Don't rush to believe the Buddha's words. Hello everyone, we have discussed a rather controversial practice, the twin yoga practice of Tibetan Tantra. I hope that in today's video, we won't focus on the question of right or wrong. Instead, please open your mind and maintain a relaxed attitude as we take a comprehensive look at Vajrayana and see how experts comment on this religion. Recently, a Buddha statue in Thailand faced backlash online for being depicted in a way that was deemed too sexual. A naked woman is shown sitting in the Buddha's lap with her arms wrapped around him. This portrayal immediately sparked outrage, with many people feeling that Buddhism had been disrespected, causing great anger among Thai Buddhists. Furthermore, many Vietnamese internet users also expressed their dissatisfaction with the image. The Bangkok Post quoted one netizen calling the sculptor a demon who wanted to tarnish the Buddha's reputation. A Facebook user even urged Thai authorities to intervene diplomatically to destroy the statue. Tibetan Buddhism, which follows the Vajrayana path, was historically practiced in secrecy in remote mountains and forests, with masters who lived in complete isolation, having no communication with the outside world. However, in the modern age, with 21st century media, Tantra has become widely known through various sources. In a previous video discussing the twin yoga practice, I also noticed that many young people are interested in Tantra. However, it's important to recognize that many people misunderstand Tantra, and the main reason is the lack of complete and accurate information. First and foremost, we need to understand that to become a Vajrayana practitioner, one must undergo many practices to purify the body, speech, and mind, eventually transforming them into the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. On the path to purifying the soul, to become the Dharma body of the Buddha, one must experience tantric practices under the direct guidance of a teacher, much like how a doctor adjusts or increases a treatment plan for a patient. This practice is also known as Vajrayana or Tantric Buddhism. Vajrayana has 4 distinctive characteristics. 1. The yoga of purifying the surrounding environment thoroughly. 2. The yoga of purifying and manifesting one's divine appearance. 3. The yoga of purifying all sensations deeply. 4. The yoga of purifying all actions thoroughly. Any teaching that contains these 4 essences is considered Vajrayana. Thus, it is clear that Tibetan Buddhism, or Vajrayana, does not lead practitioners down a path of indulgence in sensual desires, which is often associated with human life. So, what is the significance of Buddha statues sitting on lotus flowers, embracing a woman? Do these images offend other sects or the global Buddhist community? After 500 years since the Buddha's parinirvana, we see that the structure of relationships and karma includes a structure of the mental continuum that has become extremely narrow. Therefore, each practitioner's personal journey toward liberation and enlightenment has become more difficult. As such, Vajrayana uses everything a person possesses in their mind to make progress on the path to liberation. A famous Lama once said, "When a person falls to the ground, they must rely on the ground to stand up." This emphasizes the skillful means and techniques of Vajrayana. Most debates revolve around the practice of Yabgyum, or the twin yoga practice, where a Buddha is depicted embracing a female deity. Many Buddhists have considered this inappropriate, believing it contradicts the Buddha's teachings and represents a form of degeneration. More seriously, some Vajrayana teachers have even been accused of spiritual abuse for misinterpreting or misusing this practice. And yet, all sentient beings in the desire realm are composed of coarse material substances, and desire is always present. However, for beings in the form realm and higher, including the formless realm, desire no longer exists. Why? Simply because the material substance that forms their bodies has become much subtler and lighter compared to the material substance of ordinary human bodies. I am endlessly inspired in expressing thoughts that flow through the deepest corners of the mind. They have been expressed externally through drawings or sculpted into statues. The ultimate goal is to show us that in order to transform the delusions of the 5 aggregates and the defiled world, one must overcome the arduous trial of desire. The Buddha taught that the greatest flaw of sentient beings is attachment. Day and night, they live in attachment, unable to let go. If one can transform their desire for sensual pleasure into the desire to diligently study the Dharma without forgetting the practice for even a moment, they will quickly attain Buddhahood. This Dharma body is extremely subtle and pure, containing not even a trace of sensual pleasure. The level of purity and subtlety of the Bodhisattva's bodies is far more refined and pure than even the beings of the formless realm. Therefore, the divine images of deities depicted in union are entirely free from any trace of sensual desire. Typically, we have the habit of viewing Buddha statues with the eyes of an ordinary human being. It is completely wrong to say that this male deity is engaging in intercourse with that female deity. But if you view the statue through the perspective of someone who meditates, you will see it entirely differently. The Buddha in the statue is in a complete meditative posture, not paying any attention to the woman in the statue. The woman and the posture that appears to suggest sexual union are merely depictions of the blissful state of meditation. Those who have experienced meditation and entered deep concentration will understand the joy of meditation, when the hormones that create euphoria are released after the body reaches a state of total relaxation. Additionally, this is a warning for all sentient beings to understand that on the path of practice, we are still heavily influenced by past karma. Deep in the mind, there remains attachment that has not yet been fully eradicated, as the transformation of consciousness into wisdom has not yet occurred. This is a way to express the mind externally. Instead of avoiding it, we face it to resolve it, prescribing the correct remedy for the illness. It is this attachment that keeps us bound in the cycle of samsara. A German professor specializing in Tibetan Buddhism, with 35 years of research and many works on Tantra, commented on the Yab-Yum statue, also known as the Father-Mother, which is common in Tantric Buddhism, as follows. According to Professor Andrea, the term Yab-Yum comes from Tibet and simply means Father-Mother. It is a term often used to describe the Buddha and various other Buddhas in a unified posture. The Sanskrit term for Yab-Yum is Yuganada, which means unification, and is associated with the concept of yoga. The Sanskrit term yoga itself means yoke, and refers to the well-known spiritual practice of India, which Buddhism also adopted to train the mind, much like a yoke that guides oxen pulling a plow or a cart. Therefore, the term Yuganada clarifies the fact that the Yab-Yum image symbolizes a religious practice aimed not at sexual indulgence or anything similar, but at a specific method of meditation. This method is different from other forms of yoga, as it uses vital energies that go beyond sexual instincts. At first glance, it may seem illogical that a physical representation of union symbolizes a religious practice aimed at mental training. However, there are two reasons why this symbol was chosen. 1. In practice, Vajrayana can be performed with a partner, but it is primarily practiced individually through visualization. Today, most people around the world who practice this form of meditation are monks or nuns. Some may practice it with their spouse, but even these individuals do not focus on sexual instincts more than others. Number 2. One of the main reasons for using erotic symbolism in Vajrayana meditation is that this religion was influenced by a transgressive Chinese tradition. However, no matter where it is practiced in the world, it ultimately aims to achieve the inner mystical experience of union and oneness. Theistic religions refer to this as the union between the divine and the human. In Hinduism, it is the union of the individual soul, Atman, with the universal soul, Brahman. Vajrayana Buddhism speaks of the union between wisdom and emptiness, or wisdom and compassion. Objectively, sexual activity clearly represents the most non-religious form of union that humans can experience. The founders of Vajrayana Buddhism saw this as the most appropriate symbol for what happens in the mystical union of the spirit. This is perhaps the most controversial reason for developing the idea and creating an image of the Buddha in a sexual posture. Simply put, Tantra states that overcoming sexual desire is the most challenging thing for humans. If, through practice, one can overcome the desire for sensual pleasure, it means they have succeeded. A few years ago, when asked about the presence of sexual images in daily Tibetan Buddhist practice, a Lama was questioned whether there were any great Tibetan masters qualified to teach the twin yoga practice of Vajrayana. He simply said, no. With this analysis, I hope that those who harbor negative feelings toward the twin yoga practice may adopt a different perspective and gain a deeper understanding of this practice specifically and Vajrayana in general. You know, a great master once said this about me: you should not be quick to believe in the Buddha, because perhaps even the Buddha himself did not want us to believe immediately, to believe quickly, or to have blind faith in him. A faith based on emotion, a faith that follows the masses, a faith like a conditioned reflex can easily damage the teachings that the Buddha worked so hard to establish. When I was around 7 or 8 years old, I followed my grandmother to the temple, and those temples, with all their solemnity and mystery, captivated me greatly. When my grandmother knelt down, clasped her hands, and bowed, I was also taught to do the same. Strange feelings of awe and reverence would arise in my heart after each clasp of the hands and each bow. Everything continued like that until I turned 20. After a strange dream, and after all the thoughts accumulated during my youth about the hand clasping and bowing every time I entered a temple, I started to wonder, why do I have to kneel and bow like that? Why do I have to believe in the mysterious magical powers coming from statues on the altar? Why should I believe just because my grandmother believed, my parents believed, and everyone around me believed? Why should I believe just because it has become a habitual faith, a reflexive faith that has followed me since childhood? I brought all these questions to a monk at a temple in the heart of Hanoi. The monk explained to me that religion is ultimately built on the foundation of faith. With faith comes goodness, with faith comes peace, and with faith comes liberation. That answer both satisfied and did not satisfy me. It satisfied me in that, from a principle perspective, it is true that all religions and beliefs in this life are built on the foundation of faith. Some indigenous beliefs hold unconditional faith, but based on my research at that time, I realized that all major religions have their own worldview, a perspective on life, and a foundation of reasoning. If we ignore these foundational principles and believe immediately and impulsively, it is possible that faith could lead us astray. While reading Buddhist scriptures, I suddenly realized that even the Buddha once addressed this issue. In the Kalama Sutta, one of the most famous and insightful suttas, a story is told. Once, the Buddha passed through the land of the Kalamas, and the young people of the Kalamas ran up to him and asked, "Teacher, every ascetic who passes through here claims that their teaching is the true doctrine. As a result, we are confused and don't know whom to believe." The Buddha's answer was, "Do not hastily believe in anything, even if it is written in the scriptures. Do not hastily believe in anything, even if it is spoken by renowned teachers." The young men of the Kalamas still did not fully understand, so the Buddha elaborated further. With everything that is taught by others, you must use your mind to reflect, investigate, and critique it. Then apply it to your daily life. See if it helps you to free yourself from suffering. If it does, then believe. The Buddha's answer leads us to the conclusion that we should not even believe in the Buddha himself or his teachings immediately. Instead, we should first reflect on them, investigate them, and test them in our lives. Amida Buddha. I don't know if that understanding is harsh or misguided, and so I began reading more Buddhist texts and started testing what I read in my life. Yet, even after reading and experimenting, I still did not believe immediately. There was a long period when I would visit temples to seek some peace amidst the stress that life brings. But I no longer clasped my hands and bowed to the Buddha statues as I used to. I thought, according to the spirit of the Kalama Sutta, if I had not yet fully investigated and established a complete belief in the Buddha's teachings, and I still clasped my hands and bowed to the Buddha, perhaps even the Buddha himself would not be pleased. Of course, even though I didn't clasp my hands and bow, I still maintained the necessary respect that any humble being should have for a great figure in human history. By the second year of university, I started exploring the concept of independent thinking through Western philosophy books. Strangely, the moment of my deepest realization about the concept of independent thinking was also the moment I admired and trusted the teachings of the Buddha more than ever before. From that point on, I've held the belief that the Buddha, through his life and teachings, provides the clearest evidence and the greatest lessons on what the Western world calls independent thinking. Born in a splendid royal palace, the future king was imbued with the typical mindset of a privileged prince, prepared for nearly 20 years to become a ruler one day. However, Prince Siddhartha, the future enlightened one, decisively chose to leave behind the regal life of a prince, to escape the environment he grew up in, and to break free from the ideologies he had been taught. He accepted the risk of walking a different path, a path unlike the one laid out for him. This decision was the wise response of an independent thinker, one who would go on to create a unique path of practice, a path that had never been seen before, the middle way. After attaining enlightenment, Shakyamuni Buddha shared with us teachings that continued to demonstrate his profound independence from the dominant Hindu traditions of the time. If Hinduism taught that everything in the universe was created by gods, the Buddha taught that there were no mystical gods. All things arise and cease due to conditions. The concept of conditions, or dependent origination, is perhaps one of the clearest expressions of independent thought, and one of the most modern and dialectical concepts in the Buddha's teachings. In the Upanishads, the core philosophical texts of Hinduism, the fate of a person in this life is determined by the actions of their previous life, known as karma. This principle is often expressed as you sow, so shall you reap. If one planted bad seeds in a previous life, they would inevitably suffer bad consequences in this one. Such a viewpoint places people in a passive relationship with their fate, as they cannot determine their own destiny. But Shakyamuni Buddha inserted the concept of conditions between karma and its results, giving people the power to be proactive. This idea of conditions enables individuals to shape their own lives in the present, rather than being passively bound to their past actions. Even if one created bad karma in the past, by creating good conditions in the present, they could transform that bad karma or even purify it to create good outcomes. Clearly, in the intellectual landscape of ancient India, while pre-Buddhist religions emphasized fate and the deterministic view of karma as dictated by gods, Buddhism set itself apart with its view that everything depends on one's own actions. If pre-Buddhist religions were theistic and deterministic, Buddhism is deeply dialectical. This shows that the Buddha was, in fact, quite modern. For me, the greatest lesson the Buddha left behind is the lesson of independent action, independent thinking, and independent contemplation. Now, every time I enter a temple, I clasp my hands and bow before the Buddha with the greatest reverence. In such moments, I feel as though the great figure on the high altar is smiling at me, reminding me to view all phenomena in life with an independent mind, even if those phenomena have been established as the highest truths. I hope you found this story, which I collected from a follower of Buddhism, insightful. What do you think about this perspective? Please leave your comments below the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. The shocking final words of a Zen master before his passing. A warning on wrongful practice. Welcome back, everyone, to Mind Podcast. If we have a proper understanding of life and fully grasp the teachings of the Buddha, we can break through the fog of ignorance, and death can transcend the boundaries of time and space. We can calmly face death and even see it as something beautiful. However, most of us do not understand the reason for our existence and are always searching for a true purpose in life. Here's a story about the warning words of a Zen master before his death, which everyone should hear at least once. My entire life was immersed in vanity. Outwardly, I had fame, published books, and people followed me to learn Buddhism. But I understood that deep down I had not truly attained enlightenment, nor had I seen my true self. Looking back now, I realized that what I thought was wisdom had actually betrayed me. The Zen master expressed his deep regret for the things he had done throughout his life just before passing away. And his words served as a warning to all who are on or will embark on the path of spiritual practice. This Zen master was a close friend of mine for many years, and he suffered from a terminal illness. Facing death in meditation and contemplating death itself, we recognized it as a faithful companion. Before his passing, I frequently visited him and listened to his teachings. One day when I visited, he was sitting upright, his face frail but always wearing a smile. We sat down and talked. He said, "My whole life was immersed in vanity. Outwardly I had fame, published books, and people followed me to learn Buddhism. But I know all too well that I had not truly attained enlightenment, nor had I seen my true self. Looking back now, I realize what I thought was wisdom had actually been my downfall. I said, "Haven't there been past masters who attained enlightenment just before passing away?" He replied, "Those are people of great capacity, who can let go of all worldly attachments and possess a pure mind. But I am not like them. I am of lesser capacity. My whole life I've been too intelligent, too talented, and too emotional. Because of this, there have been so many things I couldn't let go of." I asked, "So what practice have you been cultivating recently? Every time I visit, I see you in meditation, and I don't have the heart to disturb you. I just stand outside, reciting the Buddha's name and praying for you." The Zen master chuckled and said, "Thank you. As for life and death, I already know when I will pass away and where I will be reborn in my next life." I said, "Doesn't that mean your practice has reached a very high level? You know when you will die and where you will reincarnate, yet you still haven't attained enlightenment?" The Zen master, slightly embarrassed, said, "That's just a small ability and has nothing to do with enlightenment. It also has nothing to do with discovering my true self. Since I was 3 years old, I've been able to recall the conditions of my past reincarnations. In this life, I have always known where I came from. My whole life's practice has been about finding out where I will go when I die. Now, I know the exact day I will die and where I will go afterward. But it's just another cycle of reincarnation, continuing to be a sentient being in the 3 realms. This superficial practice is still far from attaining enlightenment, from finding my true self." I asked, "Then why have you been so diligent in your practice lately?" The Zen master said, "I am wholeheartedly repenting for my karmic obstacles, purifying my heart. As someone who is about to die, I hope that before my death can cleanse my inner being. For the past few months, I've been constantly repenting for the karmic obstacles I have created, repenting for the wrongs I have committed, repenting for not being truly filial, repenting for hurting my family and friends, repenting for all the arrogant words I have spoken, repenting for saying one thing but thinking another, repenting for the emotional harm I caused to the women who loved me, and repenting for the lies I told to my fellow practitioners." The Zen master spoke of many things he needed to repent for, and as he spoke, tears flowed down his face. He told me, "A person who sincerely repents before their death is truly letting go of their burdens, allowing them to set off lightly." As he said this, he smiled. Everyone knew what setting off meant. Then he asked me to find a large iron basin and burn all of his manuscripts from his life, about 1 meter tall, right in front of him. "Help you burn them." I couldn't bear to do that. "This is the fruit of your life's work. Many publishers want to print your manuscripts. Why would you want to burn them? Isn't it good to keep them?" I truly didn't want to burn them. He said, "If you don't burn them, I will burn them myself. These writings have no value. If I don't burn them, what are they good for? I have not attained enlightenment. All those chaotic explanations of Buddhism are, in the end, just obstacles. I know this very well. Burning these manuscripts will prevent future generations from being led astray, and will also help avoid adding to my karmic sins. If I haven't found my true self, then everything I've said is no more than the words of a crafty fox. Do you want to see me fall into hell?" Calmly continued, "My whole life, I have preached the Dharma, explained the scriptures, debated right and wrong, but because I never attained enlightenment, I never saw the truth. I spoke arrogant words and made improper interpretations. Now I'm suffering the consequences, with illness in my mouth, throat, and stomach." His face grew thinner day by day, but because of his meditation, his spirit remained somewhat strong. Together, we burned each of his books, including his many journals, some of which were written with a brush in very neat handwriting. As I watched his calm and detached demeanor, I was deeply moved. I, too, wanted to burn all of my journals and manuscripts before I died, leaving nothing behind, and departing with a clear conscience, without any worry. Sensing my thoughts, he smiled and said, "Don't follow my example. There is no future in what I've done." Many times when I visited, the Zen master told me he was repenting for his karmic obstacles, for the sins he had committed in the past. He told me, Verbal karma is the hardest thing to repent for in this lifetime. I have preached the Dharma, spoken recklessly, and said wrong things about others. My verbal karma has piled up as high as a mountain. He sighed. Even though my verbal karma is so heavy, I still want to repent for all of it so that I can die peacefully. It seems that I will die a month later than I initially predicted, and I will use that extra month solely for repenting for my verbal karma. People who practice the way or learn Buddhism create karma just by speaking, let alone someone like me who has accumulated verbal karma by speaking wrong words, arguing about right and wrong, and talking about inappropriate matters. I don't know if a month will be enough to fully repent. Once I've finished repenting, that will be the day I leave this work. He was both my friend and my teacher for many years, so I was very sad and asked him if he had any final advice or warnings for me before he left. The Zen master said, "I know the path ahead for you, but I cannot tell you. If I told you, it would harm you. Your future path lies within your own heart. If you can sit quietly and look inward each night, you will know it yourself. The wisdom I have gained in this lifetime, which I can share with you, is this: if you have not attained enlightenment, if you have not awakened, if you have not seen your true self, then under no circumstances should you become a teacher for others. Being a teacher to others will only harm them, leading them astray, and that will also mean harming their life force. The karmic retribution for this is severe. The consequences of my actions are right before your eyes. So never become a teacher for others unless you are truly enlightened. Secondly, if you do attain enlightenment and find your true self, you must still continue your practice. Only after you have reached a high level in your practice should you step out to spread the Dharma. Even if you have disciples, remember never to accept offerings and never mistreat your disciples. I have seen too much of this in the world. Many teachers treat their disciples like servants. Sin for that is extremely heavy. Third, never look down on anyone who doesn't understand the Dharma, even if their understanding is shallow or misguided. You must never mock such a person. In my lifetime, I have mocked many people for their incorrect views, and as a result, I have faced karmic retribution. Every unenlightened person could one day become a Buddha. Once they awaken, they become an enlightened being. How could you mock an enlightened one? I understand this principle, but my arrogance and bad habits have led me to accumulate a lot of negative karma. In the past month, all of my repentance has been for the sins I committed against those I once looked down upon. Fourth, if you meet others in the future, whether they are great teachers or people of different beliefs, you should never compare who is higher or lower. In this world, there are countless bodhisattvas who take human forms to guide others. Can it be that there are no bodhisattvas teaching among people of different beliefs? You must avoid having a mind of discrimination and prejudice. Instead, listen wholeheartedly and look within yourself. Wisdom will naturally arise from within, endlessly. In the past, I loved debating and arguing with others, using my pen as a weapon. The result was throat cancer and esophageal cancer, truly deep karmic retribution. As he spoke, tears continuously flowed from his eyes. They were tears of regret, awakening, and also a warning. Have you remembered what I've told you? Yes, I replied. Yes, I remember. Over the past 10 years, I've had some superficial fame, and occasionally, people have come to ask me to be their teacher. I remember the Zen master's words well, and have never accepted a disciple. There have been times when people knelt down to bow to me, and I hurriedly knelt down and bowed in return. These are the teachings the Zen master gave me. A month later, he told me, "It's time for me to go. I will reincarnate in the Northwest. Though that area is poor, the people are honest and simple. The roots of spiritual practice and the Dharma are deep there. It's not like in the Jiangnan region, where people use the Dharma to make money, or like in the Northeast, where there's no true respect for the Buddha. I will be reborn in the Northwest, and if the two of us are destined, we may meet again in 30 years. At that time, you were the older brother and I was the younger brother. You'll have to help me out, won't you?" We both laughed. I said, "When I was learning meditation with you and made no progress, you once gave me a kick. Now it's my turn to kick you back." He said, "If you can, kick me hard." Hopefully, with that kick, I will attain enlightenment right then and there. He truly passed away on the exact day he had predicted. His body was cremated, and I took a small amount of his ashes with me when I moved. One year, I noticed that the tree growing outside my window was a begonia tree. Suddenly, I remembered the poem he wrote before he passed. Begonia blooms amidst the breeze, the fragrance of Zen drifts far and wide. Clear sky is my true homeland, returning to seek the way, but where is it found? Health, fortune, and longevity are not my pursuit. I suddenly understood and decided to scatter his ashes beneath the begonia tree outside my window. Previously, there had been a pine tree there. It had been planted for 2 years. Due to some work in the neighborhood, they had moved the pine tree and planted the begonia in its place about 5 years ago. During the summer, the begonia's broad leaves sheltered countless cicadas that sang beneath its branches. By late autumn, the begonia bloomed with bright red flowers and the cicadas' songs ceased. The night grew unusually quiet. So quiet, felt unsettling without the cicadas' usual chirping. People often regard blessings, longevity, and peace as the 5 great fortunes of life. But the Zen master did not seek these worldly fortunes. He only sought the great way. His prediction about my future residence and the begonia tree absorbing his ashes came true. He once said that all of these things are impermanent and far removed from the great way and the true self of life. Even in his practice, he displayed a profound understanding of impermanence. But he had not yet escaped the cycle of birth and death, nor had he attained enlightenment or found the true self of life. As I write these words, the Zen master has already passed away more than 10 years ago. Reflecting on my own practice, I cannot help but feel ashamed. Who the Zen master was, I do not wish to reveal his name. Since he burned all of his manuscripts, it is clear that he didn't want anyone to remember him anymore. I believe that one day I will meet him again, somewhere in this vast universe. Dear friends, life isn't always rosy. We must experience failure, anxiety, and fear to help us grow and understand the world. The wise words of the Buddha are heartfelt advice, intended to help you regain balance and find the strength to continue pursuing your ideals. The boundless, wondrous Dharma guides sentient beings to live rightly, beautifully, to know love, trust, giving, and receiving. Reflect on the Buddha's wise sayings below. Quiet your mind. Live more slowly. Give. Be more compassionate. Love more. Here are some of the Buddha's wise teachings. The root of all human suffering is attachment. If you don't love yourself, you cannot love others. Be kind whenever possible. In fact, it's always possible for everyone to be kind. Happiness doesn't come naturally, it comes from your own action. The darkness is not frightening. What's frightening is leaving darkness in your life. If you are kind-hearted, the sky will always bring you peace. Victory or defeat is not final. Don't let it obstruct your life. If one day you feel everything is falling apart, don't try to do anything with a troubled mind, because the more you act, the more stuck you will become. If you feel uneasy, sit down, calm your mind for a moment, and then begin anew. Like fighting the darkness in a dark room. Pointless. What you need to do is turn on the light. It takes hundreds of lifetimes to share a boat and 1,000 lifetimes to share a pillow. It takes 500 turns of looking back in a previous life to earn just one encounter in this life. If you do not love yourself, you cannot love others. If you do not have compassion for yourself, you cannot cultivate compassion for others. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So take that step forward, open your heart, and the vast universe will embrace all the trust and love within you. Everything in life comes with a price. Few people achieve perfection. If you gain one thing, you often have to lose another. To receive much, you must give everything. To achieve lasting success and happiness, we must pay the price through persistent effort and perseverance. Compassion and generosity are not signs of weakness. In fact, they are expressions of strength. Remember, sometimes silence is the best answer. The arrogant can be saved, but the hopelessly self-deprecating cannot. Only when you recognize yourself, subdue yourself, and correct yourself, can you influence and change others. Holding hatred for others is the greatest loss for yourself. Every person should possess 4 things: confidence on their face, kindness in their heart, courage in their blood, and strength in their life. No matter how painful the past has been, you can always start again today. Do not live in the past, nor dream about the future. Live in the present moment. Each wound is a sign of growth. A person who knows contentment is the richest and happiest, for they feel no lack. The greedy, selfish, and miserly, no matter how much wealth they have, are the poorest people in the world because their hearts are filled with harmful intentions. In the past, there were people who were not wealthy but were content with their lives, smiling and happy every day. However, when wealthy individuals appeared, they looked at them and asked, "Why don't I have a life like that? A beautiful house, a car?" From that moment, they lost their own sense of value. True Buddhists should always remember that compassion is the miraculous remedy that heals the sufferings of life. By observing precepts, practicing meditation, and letting go, by doing good deeds, offering donations, or supporting one another, we follow the path to love for humanity. This is the way to transform suffering into joy and happiness, helping both ourselves and others come together and live with loving and understanding heart. There is no greater blessing in this world than the blessing of a mother. A mother gives us the most wonderful things in life. Thank you, Mother, for being my mother. Without you, this world would collapse. You give all the love in life. People suffer because they are trapped by their own views. Only when we release these views will we be free and no longer suffer. Happiness is when we live true to ourselves. You don't need others to acknowledge it. You just need to understand and be happy. That is enough. Understanding the pain of others is the greatest gift you can give them. Understanding is another name for love. If you cannot understand, you cannot truly love. Hope is very important. It makes the present less harsh. If we hope that tomorrow will be better, we can endure today's difficulty. People suffer because of their prejudices. When we view things with more openness, we become free and no longer suffer.
Hello everyone, welcome to Mind Podcast Buddhism. Today we will talk about the topic, understanding the mind in Buddhism. In this episode, we will explore the duality of body and mind, delve into how Buddhism defines and interprets the mind, and discuss its significance in achieving enlightenment and liberation. Stay tuned for an insightful journey into the depths of Buddhist philosophy. Understanding the mind in Buddhism. Humans are described as comprising two parts, body and mind. In Buddhist terminology, the body, i.e. the human physical form, is called rupa, while the mind is nama, which means spirit or consciousness. The body is material, visible, and tangible, but the mind is not. So where is the mind in the human body? The ancients believed that the mind resided in the heart. Today, science suggests that the mind originates from the brain, where the central nervous system operates and controls the entire body. The mind is differentiated into three mechanisms: the cognitive mind, which thinks, calculates, and reasons, often reflecting on past events and corresponding to the Buddhist concept of mano in Pali; the conceptual mind, which envisions future images, adjacent to the cognitive mind, called citta in Pali; and the discriminative mind, or consciousness, located at the front of the right cerebral hemisphere, referred to as vijnana in Pali. These divisions exist, but when speaking of one, we refer to all three collectively as the mind. When asked what the mind is and how to perceive it, scholars explain that the mind encompasses thoughts, judgments, doubts, disappointments, sorrows, love, longing, jealousy, etc. These abstract mental elements are invisible, but one can sense the mind through the actions and words of the body, indicating the mind's presence. For example, when a person is angry, their voice may be rough and loud, possibly swearing at the opponent. Their actions may be rude, involving hitting and breaking objects. Depending on the intensity of these actions and words, we can gauge the level of anger in that person's mind. Conversely, when the same person speaks softly, behaves gently, and has kind eyes, these images reveal that their mind is balanced and peaceful. Thus, although we cannot see the mind, it clearly governs and directs a person's entire life. It causes moments of happiness and suffering. Over time, many psychologists, philosophers, and religious researchers have commented on the mind. This article aims to briefly explore the mind in Buddhism to apply it to the practice of attaining enlightenment and liberation. Understanding the mind in Theravada Buddhism. As a great enlightened being, the Buddha recognized that everyone suffers. Suffering is a truth. Having a body means suffering, and this suffering arises from the human mind. To eliminate suffering, we must first understand when the mind brings happiness and when it causes sorrow. This means understanding what the mind is and how it functions. In the Dhammapada, the twin verses, the Buddha confirms that the mind is the master, the mind directs, and the mind creates actions. If a person acts or speaks under the influence of a tainted mind, suffering will follow them like a cart follows the ox's hoof, inescapably. Conversely, if they speak or act with a pure mind, happiness will follow them like a shadow that never leaves. The verses state: 1. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. 2. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like his never-departing shadow. Thus, the mind manifests in different states, primarily categorized into 2 types. The mind that causes suffering is likened to a muddy pond, an impure mind, the mind of an ordinary person. The mind that brings happiness is likened to a clear pond, the pure mind of a sage. According to Buddhism, humans are composed of 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, collectively called nama-rupa. Form is material and lacks awareness. Awareness in Buddhism, as taught by the Buddha, is the awareness of the mind, which includes feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Awareness in Buddhism is called vijnana, which is the awareness or discernment of the 6 senses when they interact with the 6 sense objects, giving rise to eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. When the senses interact with objects and awareness arises, this is the knowing mind, also called consciousness. When the mind thinks and plans, this is the mental formations. When it recalls past memories or imagines future images, this is perception. When feelings of joy, sorrow, pleasure, or pain arise, this is the feeling mind. The feeling mind has 2 types: physical sensations, cold, heat, pain, called body feelings, and emotional sensations, joy, sorrow, pleasure, pain, called mental feelings. These 4 aspects of awareness, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, are collectively the mind, or more accurately, the 4 functions of the mind. Understanding the mind, according to the Abhidhamma, or higher teaching, the mind is defined as awareness or knowing of the object, sense object. This awareness is merely knowing, without distinguishing between good and bad, liking or disliking. When there is comparison and discrimination, the ego is involved. A special feature of the Abhidhamma is the description of the process of the mind, i.e., the sequence of arising and ceasing of a mental stream. The mind is described as a continuous stream of 89 mental states and 52 mental factors, arising and ceasing in succession. These mental states are classified into 4 categories based on the realm: sense sphere consciousness, form sphere consciousness, formless sphere consciousness, and supermundane consciousness, which transcends the 3 realms. The Abhidhamma provides a detailed analysis of the mind on both physical and psychological aspects, known as Buddhist psychology. Due to the complexity, this article only briefly introduces the concept of mind and its functions as human awareness. Understanding the mind, according to Yogacara, consciousness-only school. Yogacara, or consciousness-only, is also a branch of Buddhist psychology, but it belongs to Mahayana Buddhism, which emerged about 9 centuries after the Buddha's passing. In northern India, 2 Brahmin brothers, Asanga and Vasubandhu, became monks and attained arhatship. According to legend, Asanga used his supernatural powers to ascend to the Tushita heaven to learn Yogacara from Bodhisattva Maitreya. He would listen at night and teach the public during the day. Vasubandhu, initially a Hinayana practitioner, later followed his brother's advice and converted to Mahayana. He authored many treatises on Yogacara, such as the 100 Dharmas, 20 verses on consciousness only, and 30 verses on consciousness only. Asanga and Vasubandhu are regarded as the founders of the Yogacara school in India. In the 7th century, during the Tang dynasty, the Chinese monk Xuanzang traveled to India to study the Yogacara school at Nalanda Monastery under the guidance of the master Shilabhadra. Upon returning to China, he propagated the Yogacara teachings and authored 2 treatises, The Establishment of the Doctrine of Consciousness Only and Verses on the 8 Consciousnesses. Xuanzang is considered the founder of the Chinese Yogacara school. Yogacara divides the mind into 8 consciousnesses and 51 mental factors. The term mind here is synonymous with consciousness. The 8 consciousnesses are eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mental consciousness, manas consciousness, and alaya consciousness. The first 6 consciousnesses correspond to the 6 senses. Yogacara distinguishes the mental base as a faculty or sense organ, also called manas consciousness. Mental consciousness arises based on the mental base, which in turn relies on alaya consciousness, the fundamental consciousness. When images pass through the 6 sense doors, they generate the 6 types of consciousness. The mental base itself is considered a consciousness, i.e. manas consciousness. Understanding a bit about alaya, manas, and mental consciousness in the Yogacara school. 1. Alaya consciousness, also known as store consciousness, has 3 meanings. A. The storing function. This consciousness acts as a storehouse, retaining and preserving the seeds of all phenomena, irrespective of whether they are good or bad. B. The stored function. This consciousness is influenced and affected by the seeds it contains. C. The self-attachment function. This consciousness is clung to by manas, which attaches to it as the self. It serves as the basis for the arising of the other 7 consciousnesses. Hence it is also called the fundamental consciousness. It is vast and deep, containing all the karmic seeds within the stream of consciousness. Its nature is neither wholesome nor unwholesome, but it contains both wholesome and unwholesome seeds. As long as it holds defiled seeds, it is grasped by manas as the self. When all seeds become pure, it is called the immaculate consciousness or the great mirror wisdom. In other words, it becomes the Tathagata Garbha, the Buddha or Dharma body. According to Yogacara, the mind is called consciousness, vijnana, when it is still defiled and clings to self and phenomena. When the mind is completely pure and selfless, it is called wisdom, jnana. 2. Manas consciousness, or mental base. This is the basis for the arising of mental consciousness, just as the eye is the basis for the arising of eye consciousness, and the ear is the basis for the arising of ear consciousness. Manas arises from the ignorant seeds of alaya, and its nature is to grasp the self. It clings to alaya as the self. All self-related attachments, such as self-delusion, self-love, self-view, and self-conceit, originate from it. The self-attachment of manas is innate self-attachment, which arises simultaneously with life. This self-attachment existed before birth, so manas does not need the 5 aggregates to grasp the self. It arises from alaya and already clings to alaya as the self. 3. Mental consciousness. When the mental base contacts mental objects, it generates awareness, called mental consciousness. Mental consciousness has 3 forms of awareness. A. Direct awareness, immediate, impartial awareness without discrimination. Inferential awareness, awareness through discrimination and comparison. C. Erroneous awareness. When the first 2 forms of awareness misrepresent reality, it is called erroneous awareness. For example, mistaking a rope for a snake in the dark. Mental consciousness can be interrupted and cease to function in 5 cases. 1. In the realm of non-perception. 2. In the cessation of perception and feeling. 3. In non-perception concentration. 4. In dreamless sleep. 5. In unconsciousness. Outside these cases, mental consciousness continuously operates even during sleep. In summary, according to Yogacara, the mind is consciousness, the knowing that includes the 6 consciousnesses as understood in Theravada Buddhism, and adds 2 new consciousnesses, manas and alaya. Buddhist scholars believe that the concept of alaya consciousness as the fundamental consciousness is reasonable, complementing the traditional view that consciousness arises from the interaction of the 6 senses with their respective objects. For example, eye consciousness arises when the eye contacts a visual object. Thus, consciousness is merely the product of the senses and their objects. The scholars explain, in the 12 links of dependent origination, ignorance conditions formations, formations condition consciousness, consciousness conditions name and form. The consciousness here is precisely alaya, the stream of karmic consciousness accumulated from many lifetimes. From Alaya consciousness arises name and form and the five aggregates, which include the six senses. The mind in Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism advocates direct pointing to the mind, seeing one's nature to become a Buddha, which means directly pointing to the human mind to realize one's true nature and become a Buddha. The human mind has many natures, such as greed, anger, delusion, arrogance, doubt, virtue, and vice. These types of mind belong to the ordinary mind. The nature that Zen Buddhism refers to is not the ordinary nature of those who do not practice Zen, but the enlightened nature. Realizing the mind, seeing the original enlightenment, and living with the enlightened nature is the meaning of seeing the nature in Zen Buddhism. Enlightened nature. Enlightened nature simply means the nature of knowing, called buddhi in Sanskrit, meaning the faculty of knowing. Enlightened nature has two meanings. The first meaning of enlightened nature, buddhi, is the innate wisdom of human beings. It has the capacity to know objects clearly without being influenced by them, belonging to the mind of a sate. Conversely, the second meaning of buddhi is intellectual sharpness. With intellectual sharpness, it is influenced by objects belonging to the worldly mind. Both types of wisdom are described by the term buddhi in the Indian language, leading to confusion. One can distinguish between the states of verbal and non-verbal knowledge of buddhi. If verbal, it is intellectual sharpness. If non-verbal, it is innate wisdom. With the wisdom of sates, buddhi, or enlightened nature, fundamentally refers to non-verbal knowledge and non-verbal awareness. In Zen terminology, enlightened nature is the non-verbal knowing, simultaneous and instantaneous. Whether with or without information, it still knows. It is a continuous, silent stream of knowing, uninterrupted, without discriminative mind, without forming concepts in the brain, only concise analysis and non-verbal awareness. It has no afflictions, no images of competition, conflict, struggle, like the mental consciousness and mental base. It has no reasoning, speculation, or should be, must be, like intellectual sharpness. It perceives things as they are, seeing the suchness of things. Prejudices, biases, and subjectivity do not exist in it. Therefore, it is unaffected by objects, non-attached, and independent. It does not follow or change with circumstances. When it is present, ignorance is absent, self is absent, afflictions are absent, habitual tendencies are absent. In all postures, it continuously absorbs external and internal objects, comprehending all while the mind remains unmoved. In Zen terminology, it is called the master. Developed Buddhism calls it true self. In Theravada Buddhism, it is considered the knowing of one entering the stream of sates. The Buddha calls it the unborn. Yogacara calls it the immaculate consciousness. Zen masters liken it to a precious pearl, or a bright mirror, or vast like space. Enlightened nature includes three: the seeing nature of the eye, the hearing nature of the ear, the touching nature of the nose, tongue, and body. In summary, enlightened nature is the knowing of the true mind, deluded mind and true mind. One deluded mind, the mind of those who do not practice, is filled with various mental states. Sometimes it dwells on past events, sometimes it imagines future scenarios. In the present, it wanders from one thought to another. Sometimes it thinks good thoughts, sometimes it thinks harmful thoughts for personal gain. It experiences happiness and suffering. Generally, this mind is bound by greed, anger, delusion, arrogance, doubt, and wrong views, known in Buddhism as fetters, defilements, or habitual tendencies. If not driven by the six sense objects, form, smell, taste, touch, and mental objects, affecting emotional responses like love, hate, animosity, it is driven by the five desires: wealth, sensual pleasure, fame, and sleep, serving the ego. If gained, it is happy. If lost, it is sad. The Buddha likens this mind to a muddy pond, calling it the ordinary mind or the mind of birth and death. Zen masters call this mind the deluded mind. 2. True mind. Unlike the deluded mind, the true mind silently knows without words. Its knowing is true, accurate, not tainted by the past, present, or future lenses. When the six senses contact the six sense objects, it perceives them as they are, seeing the suchness of the objects. It does not compare, criticize, or comment. The mental base, mental consciousness, or intellectual sharpness, i.e. the self, is absent in this mind. Silently knowing, it remains calm and free amidst all circumstances of prosperity and decline, union and separation, beauty and ugliness, gain and loss. The true mind is characterized by tranquility, purity, and clarity. The Buddha likens it to a clear pond, the mind of non-birth. Zen masters call it the true mind or enlightened nature. Summary: in general, the mind is knowing, awareness, the nature of knowing. The mind leads all phenomena. A tainted mind, clinging to self and phenomena, greedy and selfish, is the root of birth and death, the deluded mind. When the mind is freed from the 5 hindrances, sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry and doubt, the tainted mind becomes pure and boundless, the foundation of enlightenment and liberation, called the true mind. In summary, the tainted mind is suffering, the pure mind is nirvana. The deluded mind is sentient beings, the enlightened mind is Buddha. The mind in Buddhism is explained in great detail depending on the Buddhist schools. This article aims to provide beginners with an understanding of what the mind is when it is called deluded and when it is called true, to facilitate practice, purify the body and mind, and aim for enlightenment and liberation.
To become a lay Buddhist practitioner. To become a true lay Buddhist practitioner, one must first perfect oneself by taking refuge in the 3 jewels. 1. Buddha, the one who has completely awakened to the essence of the universe, encompassing both sentient and insentient beings, both worldly and transcendent phenomena, and both conditioned and unconditioned realities. 2. Dharma, the teachings that reflect the Buddha's enlightenment and provide methods for attaining liberation from suffering, leading to peace and the ultimate nirvana. 3. Sangha, the monastic community in harmonious unity and purity, the heirs of the Buddha's wisdom, who represent the Buddha in transmitting the true teachings so that all beings may attain enlightenment. After taking refuge in the 3 jewels, a lay Buddhist practitioner must aspire to achieve enlightenment just as the Buddhas have done, upholding the 5 precepts. Next, one must observe and not violate the precepts taken during the refuge ceremony. Do not kill any living being. Do not steal or take anything that is not given. Do not engage in sexual misconduct. Live a pure life, avoiding actions that disrupt one's own family's happiness or that of others, and fulfilling one's marital responsibilities faithfully. Do not lie or speak falsely. Do not consume intoxicating substances. Violating these precepts constitutes breaking the 3 types of karmic actions: bodily, verbal, and mental. Why is this so? Bodily actions include killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. Verbal actions include lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous talk. Mental actions are directed by the mind, as the mind governs the body and speech, driven by greed, anger, and ignorance. Greed, anger, and ignorance are the 3 forces that fuel the ego, causing actions that lead to suffering. Therefore, a lay Buddhist who wishes to live a life of inner peace and purity must uphold these 5 precepts. Observing the precepts not only helps avoid harmful karmic actions that bind us to the cycle of birth and death, but also brings peace and benefit to others. The 6 causes of decline. The Buddha explains 6 causes that lead to the downfall of individuals and families: alcohol addiction, gambling, a life of aimless wandering and indulgence, idling at inappropriate times, obsession with entertainment and socializing, frequenting places of revelry, associating with bad company, laziness. The Buddha taught, furthermore, dear virtuous student, know that drinking alcohol has 6 harmful effects: loss of wealth, increased illness, prone to conflict, tarnished reputation, heightened anger, decline in wisdom. If a householder or their son cannot stop drinking, their family's fortune will gradually decline. Gambling also has 6 harms: gradual financial ruin. The winner creates enemies, scorn from the wise, loss of respect and trust, social isolation, the rise of a tendency to steal. If a householder or their son becomes addicted to gambling, their family's wealth will dissipate. Virtuous student, a life of indulgence has 6 faults: neglecting self-protection, neglecting the protection of property and possessions, failing to protect one's descendants, frequently living in fear, being bound by physical suffering, inclining toward deceitfulness. These are the 6 faults. If a wealthy person or their offspring continues to indulge without restraint, their wealth will diminish day by day. Virtuous student, an obsession with music and entertainment has 6 harms: seeking places of singing, seeking places of dancing, seeking places of instrumental music, seeking places of hand-clapping performances, seeking places with melodious sounds, seeking places where drums are played. These are the 6 dangers of indulgence in music. If a wealthy person or their offspring is addicted to such activities, their wealth will diminish day by day. Virtuous student associating with bad friends has 6 harms. They deceive and manipulate. They delight in secrecy. They tempt others to harm. They scheme to seize others' wealth. They divert benefits to themselves. They expose others' faults. These are the 6 dangers of associating with bad friends. If a wealthy person or their offspring continues to associate with bad friends, their wealth will diminish day by day. Virtuous student, laziness has 6 faults. Avoiding work even when wealthy. Avoiding effort when poor. Avoiding effort in cold weather. Avoiding effort in hot weather. Avoiding effort during daylight. Avoiding effort at night. These are the 6 dangers of laziness. If a wealthy person or their offspring remains lazy, their wealth will diminish day by day. The 4 types of bad friends. The Buddha categorized bad friends into 4 types. Those who give little and demand much for personal gain. Those who are talkative and sweet-tongued but only make empty promises. Flatterers who praise you up front but criticize later. Support wrongdoing and oppose virtuous actions. Friends who indulge in extravagance, alcohol, gambling, idle wanderings. The Buddha explained to virtuous student, the hypocritical type performs 4 actions. Gives at first but takes back later, gives little but expects much, befriends out of fear, befriends for personal gain. The sweet-talking type performs 4 actions, agrees with good and bad equally, avoids you in times of trouble, hinders virtuous deeds, avoids responsibility in times of danger. The deceitful type performs 4 actions, lies about the past, lies about the future, lies about the present, punishes for even the smallest faults. The bad friend performs 4 actions, befriends you during drinking, befriends you during gambling, befriends you during indulgence, befriends you during singing and dancing. The 4 types of good friends. In contrast, the Buddha described 4 types of good friends worthy of close association. Those who prevent you from wrongdoing and encourage beneficial deeds. Those with great compassion and love for all beings. Those who offer help. Those who are loyal and cooperative in all situations. The Buddha further taught virtuous student, the friend who prevents wrongdoing performs 4 actions that bring great benefit and protection, stops others from committing wrongful acts, teaches the path of righteousness, offers kind and compassionate guidance, points out the way to heavenly realms. The loving friend performs 4 actions, rejoices in your success, worries when you face harm, praises your virtues, prevents you from engaging in harmful speech. The helpful friend performs 4 actions, protects you from carelessness, prevents financial losses due to carelessness, shields you from fear, advises you privately. The cooperative friend performs 4 actions, is willing to sacrifice their life for you, does not hesitate to share their wealth, helps you overcome fear, advises you in private. Practicing the teachings of the Buddha. These teachings are intended for lay practitioners who wish to become true Buddhists. One must apply these principles in their daily life, first perfecting oneself, and then guiding others to practice as one has. Lay practitioners must uphold the 5 precepts they have vowed to observe for life. Proper practice of these precepts purifies the 3 karmas, body, speech, and mind. When the 3 karmas are purified, the practice aligns with the Buddha's teachings. The 5 precepts are as follows. Do not kill, do not steal, do not engage in sexual misconduct, do not lie, do not consume intoxicating substances. Observing these precepts ensures the path to purity and true adherence to the Buddha's teachings. The 5 precepts and their relation to the 3 karmic actions of body, speech, and mind. The first 3 precepts, not killing, not stealing, and not engaging in sexual misconduct, pertain to bodily actions. The 4th precept, not lying, and the 5th precept, not consuming intoxicants, pertain to verbal actions, speech. It is important to note that when it comes to violating the precepts, the Buddha based his judgment on visible actions. Violations are determined by the observable forms of action, meaning that conclusions about violations are based on external evidence seen through bodily and verbal actions. Since the mind, thought, is intangible and invisible, the Buddha did not use it as a direct basis for determining violations, but only as the underlying force behind bodily and verbal transgressions. In terms of external phenomena, the Buddha concluded whether there was a violation or not based solely on the body and speech, whether they were pure or defiled. However, the physical and verbal transgressions originate from the impulses of the mind. The mind serves as the leader and master of all bodily and verbal actions. This aligns with the teaching in the Dhammapada, Chapter 1. All phenomena are led by the mind, ruled by the mind, created by the mind. If one speaks or acts with a polluted mind, suffering follows as surely as the wheel follows the hoof of the ox. All phenomena are led by the mind, ruled by the mind, created by the mind. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows as closely as a shadow that never leaves. The positive or negative consequences of our actions lead us to either suffering or peace, depending on the moral or immoral intentions behind those actions. As practitioners, we can choose whether to cultivate wholesome or unwholesome actions based on our decisions. Since our choices directly shape our present and future experiences, the Buddha provided guidance through the 5 fundamental precepts for lay practitioners. Following these precepts leads to peace and happiness in both the present and the future, whereas violating them results in suffering. The role of the 5 precepts in the 3 karmic actions. When analyzed in relation to the 3 karmic actions, body, speech, and mind, the 5 precepts emphasize that the body and speech are mere instruments that carry out the intentions of the mind. Without the influence and direction of the mind, the body and speech alone do not create karma. Therefore, the mind is the true master of all actions, while the body and speech are subordinate tools that follow its commands. However, when the body performs actions based on the commands of the mind, it becomes a direct agent of karma and bears the consequences of its deeds. Similarly, the mind remains responsible as the instigator of those actions. The body acts according to the mind's guidance, but once it carries out a deed, it becomes the primary agent of that action and must bear the corresponding consequences. Clear identification of good and bad actions. Every physical action we perform, whether good or bad, becomes evident through our deeds, allowing us to distinguish whether our actions are virtuous or immoral. Therefore, the Buddha used bodily actions as the basis for formulating the 5 precepts, born out of his boundless compassion for all beings. The purpose of the 5 precepts. The Buddha's intention was to ensure that we live a life of peace and happiness in both the present and the future. Hence, he taught that all our actions must be pure and free from defilement. By refraining from harmful actions and cultivating virtuous deeds, we can achieve a state of inner tranquility and liberation. The practice of avoiding evil and performing good involves the following. For the body, refrain from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. For speech, refrain from lying and consuming intoxicating substances. By adhering to these precepts, we protect ourselves from unwholesome actions and cultivate a life of purity and harmony. The benefits and harms of observing and violating the precepts. As previously mentioned, observing the precepts brings peace and happiness in the present life as well as in the future. Observing the precepts not only benefits the individual, but also creates harmony within the community and society as a whole. A. Benefits of observing the precepts for individuals and the community. The purpose of the precepts is to prevent individuals from committing harmful actions, restraining from evil. Engaging in harmful deeds nurtures greed, anger, and ignorance, the 3 poisons that lead to suffering and affliction in both the present and future across the realms of existence. These 3 poisons, greed, hatred, and delusion, compel the mind to form desires for possession. Whether driven by greed, anger, or delusion, the mind initiates actions of the body and speech, resulting in actions that harm others for selfish gain. Examples of bodily transgressions include killing others or living beings, stealing others, possessions through deceit, sexual misconduct that disrupts others' happiness. These actions create karma that will lead to suffering in either the near or distant future. The completion of a harmful action creates the seed of karma, karmic cause that will eventually yield a corresponding karmic result of suffering. Similarly, verbal actions influenced by a defiled mind include harsh speech, offensive and cruel words, slander, stirring division by spreading lies and gossip, false speech, speaking untruths for selfish purposes, frivolous speech, exaggerations and fabrications that distort the truth. When a person speaks deceitfully or maliciously to satisfy their greed, anger, or delusion, They nurture these poisons through their speech, causing harm to others while creating suffering for themselves. The Buddha emphasized avoiding alcohol as well, as it dulls the mind, clouds judgment, and prevents one from distinguishing right from wrong. When intoxicated, a person loses self-control and may commit harmful deeds they would not do when sober. These actions are seeds of future suffering that perpetuate the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, the Buddha advised lay practitioners to refrain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and drinking alcohol. By observing these 5 precepts, one avoids nurturing greed, anger, and ignorance, thereby refraining from creating negative karma for oneself, individual karmic cause, and society, collective karmic cause. One avoids creating bad causes in the present, which leads to freedom from harmful karmic results in the future. A person who refrains from evil actions not only enjoys peace of mind, but also contributes to a harmonious and orderly society. When individuals avoid harming others, refrain from stealing, maintain purity in their relationships, speak truthfully, and avoid intoxicants, society becomes a peaceful and blissful place. When every member of society refrains from harmful actions, such as killing, stealing, deceit, and drunkenness, the community transforms into a paradise of peace and happiness. Positive practices beyond restraint. Observing the precepts is not limited to refraining from evil. Positive actions include not killing, releasing and protecting life, compassion for all beings; not stealing, practicing generosity, sharing and giving; not engaging in sexual misconduct, maintaining purity and fidelity; not lying, practicing honesty and integrity; not consuming intoxicants, honoring wisdom and maintaining a disciplined life. By both avoiding evil and actively doing good, individuals foster not only their own happiness, but also contribute to the well-being of others, ensuring peace and joy in the present and rebirth in heavenly realms. Avoiding negative karma in the present and future. When one refrains from creating negative karma through body, speech, and mind, one avoids suffering in the present and future. By abstaining from harmful actions, one also mitigates the effects of past negative karma until it gradually dissipates. When an individual continually practices virtue, their body, speech, and mind become purified. When the 3 actions of body, speech, and mind are free of defilement, the practice of the precepts is complete in both restraint, avoiding evil, and action, cultivating virtue. Observing the precepts fulfills both individual karmic causes and collective karmic causes. Individual karmic cause leads to inner peace and prevents future suffering. Collective karmic cause contributes to a harmonious, peaceful society. B. Harms of violating the precepts for individuals and the community. The consequences of violating the precepts are clear. When individuals act contrary to the 5 precepts taught by the Buddha, the harmful actions they create, individual karmic cause, lead to inevitable suffering for themselves and the community, collective karmic cause. If lay practitioners violate the precepts, their harmful actions will only intensify their greed, hatred, and delusion, strengthening their ego and increasing their ignorance. This results in perpetual conflict, resentment, and suffering. Ultimately, they will be trapped in the cycle of suffering and rebirth in the lower realms. Examples of harmful actions include murder and violence, theft and deceit, sexual misconduct that destroys relationships, lying to deceive others for personal gain, drunkenness that leads to reckless and harmful behavior. These actions not only cause immediate suffering for oneself and others, but also create karmic seeds that lead to suffering in future lives. When individuals in society engage in such actions, they create division, chaos, and misery, preventing peace and stability. Those who indulge in greed, hatred, and delusion become enslaved by their desires and perpetuate the cycle of karmic retribution. Observing the precepts is essential for both individual and collective well-being. By refraining from harmful actions and cultivating virtuous deeds, lay practitioners can purify their body, speech, and mind. In doing so, they create a foundation for peace, happiness, and liberation in the present and future. Conversely, violating the precepts results in suffering, conflict, and an endless cycle of karmic retribution. The Buddha's teachings guide us to choose virtue over vice, ensuring not only our own peace, but also contributing to a harmonious and blissful society.